Welcome back to our Unit 3 1000 paper cranes. Before we get started, I want you to take a minute to reflect. In our last lesson, we talked about the meaning of the paper crane in Japanese culture. Try to rethink what the purpose was of the paper crane in Japanese culture, and how could you use the paper crane to communicate about something here in our culture? Just a reminder, your project is going to be to create a still life drawing that uses the Japanese paper crane to document a wish or the piece that the paper crane brings. So here are two examples of photos that I took when I was messing around with the composition that I might want to use for my still life arrangement. And you will get an opportunity today to start taking photos or practice sketching out different compositions. For this assignment, we are going to be using pencil. Okay, so when it comes to making an arrangement similar to these with objects, you need to be thinking about composition. Composition is defined as the arrangement of elements within the pictorial space. The arrangement of these elements affects how the viewer interacts with a work of art. If you have your objects overlapping or stacked on top of each other or on angles, that helps keep your viewer moving throughout your composition and staying interested in your work of art. You want to aim to make sure that your viewer's eyes never leave your still life arrangement. So with composition, you get a little bit of control over your viewer. So composition in music is when you've got the rhythm, you also have okay, here I'm going to have my verse 1, and then I'm going to have a bridge, and then the chorus, verse 2, bridge, chorus. And you have this structure to how a song is going to be laid out. You know that this sequence has to happen before this can happen, before this happens. That is the same in composition. Before you can start on a work of art, you first have to get a structure down. You have to understand that before you get to the end product, you have to draw it, you have to practice it, and before you can even practice it, you have to go through this planning phase. So composition is part of that planning phase. It is laying out your whole work of art into a structure, a pattern structure, much like a song that has the rhythm, the verse, the bridge, the chorus. You have all of these compositional pieces that make a work successful in music. It is the same way in art. And composition affects every single type of art. It affects everything that you see. And so composition is one of the most important things that you could focus on in your piece today. So when we look at these pieces of art here, I want you to start looking at focal points. What are your eyes drawn to right away? Typically, you will have 1 or 2 or 3 elements dominate your piece. Dominating your piece means that your viewer's eyes go right to them right away. If you have more than 3 things that dominate your viewer's attention, then you're going to have elements that are competing, and your viewer's not going to be able to tell, what am I looking at here? What's the point? Okay, it just comes off as messy or kind of out of control, like a pointless piece of art. So the element that dominates a piece is called a focal point. Now in these 3 images on this slide, starting over at the very left, you have mangoes that are kind of bunched up, and then on the other side of the painting, you have a blue jug. The mangoes carry an orange color, and then the jug being blue, its complement. So that jug is going to stand out against those mangoes, or those mangoes look even brighter because of so much of the blue surrounding them. So you can create a focal point by using specific colors to really emphasize your main area of focus. Looking at our middle work of art, this one really fits right into your project. So you have paper airplanes all over the place, and then you have your focal point being the stark, bright orange-red scissors. Against the black and white paper planes, the scissors really stand out because of the color. And then looking at the image all the way to the right, if you were to close your eyes and then open them, at least for me, my eyes automatically go to the highlight on the forehead of the skull. This is called contrast, and the artist has used contrast, the highlight against really dark areas of the work of art, to bring the viewer's eyes directly to the area of emphasis known as your focal point. So when you create your still life arrangement, you will need to find an area where you want your viewer's eyes to go as soon as they open. Oftentimes, though, we can create a focal point by making the object unusual next to what is around it. So take a look at the picture above. There's a quite unusual, nasty, grasshopper-looking head on one of the people. That is the focal point. And we know that because everything else around this nasty head is all normal faces that we know. An example of this in a still life arrangement may be boxes, and then you've got a really organic fluid glass bottle in the middle of those boxes. Boxes being geometric shapes make your organic shaped glass bottle stand out. So that glass bottle then becomes your focal point. It is the unusual item next to what is around it. So still life arrangements must include movement, value, contrast, and composition that works. So these are the items that I'm going to be challenging you on when you make your arrangement today. So for movement sometimes describes the actual movements that an object can make. So if you were doing a sculpture, you may have elements of movement that the sculpture is physically moving. But in two-dimensional work, we focus on the viewer's eyes doing the moving. So you want to strategically place your objects in such a way that your viewer's eyes go from your focal point to the next object, to the next object, to the next object, to the next object, and back to your focal point. And the viewer's eyes are working in this circular experience. They are never leaving the page because you have so much movement happening in your work of art that the viewer cannot peel their eyes away from that. So once again, as an artist, you do have a little bit of control where your viewer looks by planning out the direction of each of your objects. So you do have control where the viewer looks, but you do not have control over what the viewer perceives or feels about your piece. But it is pretty great that as an artist, you do have a little bit control over what you are creating and how that influences your audience member. So here's an example of movement. If you look at the painting on the left, you might find your eyes starting somewhere along this bottom area and following this little river and these trees all the way back. Because of how these hills are as well, our eyes kind of follow those curves. So looking at the image on the right, this red line indicates the movement that the artist has chosen to use to keep the audience member's eyes on this work of art. So starting over here in this area of the painting, your eyes might have followed the river up the trees, carried over this whole hill of trees, back to these hills off in the distance, carrying over to these trees up to the corner, and back down only to start again. So you want to keep your viewers' eyes in this continuous circle of moving around your work of art. It's not a good thing if your viewers' eyes leave your work of art to look at somebody else's, okay? So you want to try to engage your viewer as long as possible. So movement is super key to making a great composition. If we take a look at this painting here by Edgar Degas, I want you guys to close your eyes just for 5 seconds, open them back up, and think about what you see right away. The artist has used a couple things here to help us find the focal point. The focal point is this woman here, not just because she's in the center of the paper, but because the person sitting next to her is wearing black and she's wearing white. The artist has used contrast in this sense. There's also a really dark shadow against her fair skin, and a dark shadow over here against the white that is surrounding her head. So kind of framing in her face here. But then the artist also uses these cross lines. So he's got a table going in this diagonal direction and tables going in this direction. So these tables already inform our eyes that whatever is behind them needs to be looked at. So we're automatically drawn right to our female in the picture. So skipping composition planning is like going on a road trip and not knowing how to get to your destination. Composition planning is so important. It is the way that you start to mess around with how you want your objects to be arranged and what objects do you want to show on your paper. I personally like to set up objects in a really cool arrangement, and then I like to zoom in and create a work of art of just a small portion of that overall still life arrangement. This would be like an abstract still life. Totally acceptable if you want to go that route. But composition planning is also an experimental process. You can't be wrong in this part of your project. This is the ideation phase. This is where you start getting a better understanding of your vision and how you can keep your viewer's eye on the piece while creating something that you think is worth looking at. So I'm going to show you just a couple things that you could use to help you with your composition planning. These are called thumbnail sketches. So down here in the bottom left of this image, you've got a quick sketch of this manly baby. And then you've got scribbled trees in the background. And then the artist has taken this thumbnail sketch that has just kind of informed the artist about balance and movement and seeing if the composition works, and was translated then into this final work of art. You can see that these two things are not identical. Obviously the faces, I think this looks like a man baby, but this one over here does not. So these thumbnail sketches are just information to jot down the layout of the objects on the paper and how they all balance together. If you are using movement and value, you can start to assess how that is working here. Thumbnail sketches are one of the best tools that you can use. They're quick, they're messy, they're very small, thumbnail for a reason. And then you just do a quick sketch of your subject in different positions on the paper, zoomed in, zoomed far out, put next to other objects, totally up to you. Viewfinders, these are also extremely helpful. A viewfinder is a tool that enables an artist to frame or crop a particular scene to arrange their composition. So you can make these out of paper just simply by measuring out a square in the center it would be a 1 by 1 inch square. And then that square or that rectangle that you come up with, you can hold up to a scene, and you can crop everything out around that scene and only see what is inside this square here. And that gives you a better understanding of, ooh, this makes a really pleasing composition to look at. I love the movement of this one. I'm going to do a painting of this. So a viewfinder is a great tool to help you start to see different arrangements that you could do without getting overwhelmed by the whole thing. So if you were to set up a still life arrangement and zoom in just on a single part of your origami still life, a viewfinder would be the best tool for you to use to see what zooming in on a certain part may look like without seeing everything else around it. The rule of thirds. We've talked a little bit about composition, but the rule of thirds says that if you take a painting or any work of art and you divide it into 3 equal sections vertically and horizontally, your focal points must touch at least 3 of these 4 intersecting points. So if you look here, you've got your palm tree that is close to 1 point, your human figure, which I would argue is your focal point, touching that main focal point that main intersection at the bottom. And then you do have your snow trail touching over here. And then up here in this final corner, it's just blue sky. So you want to try to fill at least 2/3 of your paper, okay? But you also want to make sure that your focal points or your composition is touching 3 out of 4 of these intersecting points. And here's a great tip. Always use an odd number of elements or objects in a still life arrangement. If you only had 2 spheres on a piece of paper, that's not very pleasing to the eye. And for some reason, we are naturally wired to be drawn to things of odd numbers. If you wanted to draw 3 pears on a table, you could sell that drawing in an instant. We naturally love to see a pear. For some weird reason, humans are strange, but we love to see pears, but we also love to see things in trios or in a bundle of 5 objects. So if you are laying out your still life arrangement, you have a large paper crane that you want to use and a medium-sized paper crane, and that's it. Maybe consider using a light source that casts a shadow on your background, and that shadow could play as a 3rd object. So then you are meeting this odd number of elements in your work of art. But this is something I'd love to help you with if you are having a hard time arranging your still life to include the shadow as an odd number of elements. And then for more help with understanding composition, the virtual instructor site here is so helpful. There's so much to composition, and I've only taken small parts that we can apply in this project. But if you want to explore this site on your own and see different elements and principles of art that impact composition and how you can use those in your artwork, this is a great place for you to start. Okay, so value. On the left here is one of my students' drawings from when I taught at Ann Arbor Pioneer. And this was done in black colored pencil and white colored pencil. That was it. So this student had to really think about value. Now, value is when you express the lightness or darkness of a color through shading. Below, you will see a 6-step value scale. Your number 1 value is always going to be the white of the paper, okay? unless you're doing like a colored pencil drawing like this image shows here. The student had to use a white colored pencil for her for her number 1 value. But since you're working on white paper, your 1 is going to be white. Your 2 is going to be slightly shaded. See how smooth and clean that shading is. The artist here did not use their finger to smudge. Please don't do that because all the oils from your finger get all over your drawing and ruin it. Okay, so no smudging. After the artist has gotten this light first layer put down in box number 2, they did 2 layers in box number 3 to get this value. 3 layers of pencil for box number 4, 4 layers of pencil for box number 5, and 5 layers of pencil for box number 6. In this video in your homework, I'm teaching you how to create a value scale that looks just like this that you are going to upload. So your homework before our next class, I want you to use my tutorial I made you to create your own 6-step value scale. By clicking on this blue tutorial word, it will take you directly to the video on YouTube. Once you have your 6-step value scale completed, please upload it. The next thing that I would like you to do is to watch this video, another one that I made, to see how to apply value and other ways to assist in showing texture. So if you want to challenge yourself with a textured object against your really smooth paper, you will need to use one of these value scales that's shown in the video to help you capture the exact texture of whatever it is that you want to place next to something smooth. So showing the variety of different textures in your piece is a great way to show interest. So here's your opportunity to practice. Okay, so that is all for this lesson. If you have any questions, please email Miss Hadley. Otherwise, you can attend office hours, set up an appointment. Please ask questions if you have them. I can't help you unless you tell me you need help. All right, friends, have a great day and let me know if I can help you in any way.